I remember the first time I used poppers, a very hot man in the bathhouse all of a sudden had some poppers out in front of me. He took a sniff himself and he then gave me the bottle, and I imitated what he did. So I took the bottle and I inhaled. No words were exchanged. And I remember when I came, orgasm was incredibly intense. It was magnified, and it was quite an experience.
No, when you say no words were exchanged, I guess he just approached you. And
We were having sex in his room in a bathhouse.
Okay.
The poppers were probably under the bed or under the bed. I didn't even see him reach for the poppers. All of a sudden I saw him taking this bottle in his hand, taking a sniff, and then presenting it to me. He was a very hot guy, and I just did what he did.
So, how prevalent were
I didn't
poppers?
even know their name.
How often did something like that happen?
I think a lot of guys are introduced to poppers like that. I still meet guys today that don't know what poppers are, and I think poppers are something that gay guys initiate other gay guys in. It's kind of like a subculture initiation. Some people, I know on the internet, there's some people that say that they use poppers, so they say that in their profile. So there's more awareness about poppers because of profiles. I know on Craigslist, a lot of guys will say, "What are poppers?" I mean, that's a random thing. Somebody will send a message, "What are poppers?"
1 second.
Because they don't know. I remember the first time that I used poppers, when I was coming, orgasm, I thought it was like a flood. I'm not kidding you. It was an incredibly magnifying effect, and I think that there's a subset of people that use it for that. There's another group of people that used to use them for dancing because it made people feel kind of lightheaded, and it kind of intensified the sounds and sensations.
Were poppers common in all the hot spots like clubs, bars, and bathhouses?
Yeah, there was a point in the late 70s, early 80s where poppers were visible on the dance floor in the discos, and very visible. So they would be very visible there. Poppers were sold in bars. Some bars, poppers were very visible in the baths. You could also smell poppers, so that if you couldn't see them, you could smell the odor, and it was very noticeable.
What was the odor like? Was it?
It smelled like dirty socks sometimes. Had that kind of you could call it an aroma. Some people call it an aroma. Yeah.
Now, I heard at the end of the evening, some bartenders would have a last call for not only alcohol, but for poppers. Was that true?
Yeah. At the end of an evening in the bars, sometimes the bartender would announce last call for alcohol, last call for poppers, and people would get their poppers. In the early 80s, when the AIDS epidemic first started, it wasn't shocking to find out that 80% of gay men had used poppers, sometimes 90% in different samples. Now, that could also mean, though, that someone had tried poppers once and then never used them again. I think in the community we have 3 groups of people: people that love poppers, people that hate poppers. They might have done them once, but they'll never do them again. And then we have a group in the middle that could take them or leave them, and if a hot guy offers them, they'll use them, but they'll never go out and search them out to buy them, but they might use them if they're offered. I think we could also say that every gay man would be offered poppers at some point in his life for his sexual experiences, and it's just a matter of time when that's going to happen. I think the challenge for the community is, if we know that people are going to be offered poppers, what information do we give people? How do we arm them with information so they can make a smart decision, a healthy decision, and an informed decision?
Okay. Now, can you paint a picture for what a Saturday night would have been like in the fast track lifestyle?
Well, for myself, I would go out to the bars. First, I go out swimming at the YMCA. My endorphins would click in, so I'd already have a natural high. And then I'd go from the Y to the bars, and then I'd cruise around looking for a lover, somebody who I had chemistry with, somebody to have sex with, or at least chemistry, hopefully find somebody for a long-term relationship, but settle for sex. And chemistry had to be part of the equation. And I'd end up if I didn't meet somebody at a bar, I'd go to the baths. If I didn't meet somebody in one bathhouse that I thought had the right chemistry, I'd go to another bathhouse. One night I went to 3 bathhouses. I figured, my attitude was I work hard, and I'm looking for somebody that I have chemistry with. And I saw another person that did the same thing. I was surprised to find another person that was also at a 3rd bathhouse. We didn't have chemistry for each other, but we were both searching.
So, was it difficult for you to find
partners?
Yes.
No.
So, how many partners have you had in your entire
I don't know how many I've had, but it's been in the hundreds. And I think that I never thought about how many partners I had until I was asked, like in epidemiology studies. And then you have to kind of like go like, oh, you have to kind of guess. And that was kind of shocking. I remember when the epidemic started, and we started thinking how many partners we had, I realized it was going to be pretty shocking to a lot of people, especially people like my parents and my relatives. And then when we started asking questions about number of sex partners, that was kind of shocking, including to ourselves. And then it was also kind of shocking about our drug life, like which drugs we did and how many and how often. That was also shocking.
What was the drug life like?
Well, you had a lot of people use drugs. It was part of it. It seemed like we used drugs pretty heavily, but there was a range. Some people did one drug, some people did another. Myself, I was probably not in the fast lane like some people. Although I was in the fast lane, there were people going much faster than I was. Well, you had speed way back then. You had Quaaludes, you had pot, marijuana, alcohol. There were all those other ones. There was acid. There were a whole nother variety of drugs that I knew the names of that I don't really know now because I never used them. I had roommates that used them quite heavily.
How prevalent was drugs during sex?
I think poppers was a sex drug. It was for the people that used poppers on the dance floor, it was more than a sex drug. But for most people, it was a drug you used before sex and during sex. That was a common thing, and that was because it made people relaxed. You could get real earthy real fast. It kind of, if you think getting relaxed and getting animalistic and getting real earthy is really a desirable thing, it was a predictable outcome of using like poppers, for one example. In terms of marijuana, pot, some people get very relaxed with pot. I personally don't. I'm the subset that gets agitated, paranoid. I finally figured that out, so I stopped mixing my pot with my sex.
Did you ever have a bad experience with poppers?
I had a little bit of a burn once when some of the fluid touched my skin. They can burn your skin. One time, some of the fluid on poppers burned my skin when it dripped on my skin. In terms of when we were holding it, the bottle tipped a little bit too much, and so some of the fluid touched my skin, and that was bad. That was like a bad experience. It burns.
And at that point, did you think, what am I putting into my body? If it burns my skin, how is it affecting me internally?
No.
How come?
I don't know. I just didn't think of that. I mean, it just didn't. No, it didn't happen. I started getting concerned about poppers the day that the first public reports were in the news about the mysterious problem that gay men were having, and there were first reports. I think there were six 6 gay men were dead, and they were young, and they had, it was the first news report. That first day I went to the medical library at UCSF, and I was trying to think, what was it that gay guys were doing that maybe differentiated us from straight guys? That we're also having multiple partners and we're in the fast lane, having a lot of fun. And to me, an obvious thing was poppers. And poppers stood out as something that differentiated fast lane gay guys from fast lane heterosexual guys. So I went to the library. I wanted to know what's this. Then I started thinking, okay, what are we using? What might this be? So I wanted to find out, what do we know about poppers? And then as soon as I found out and started doing research, I thought, gee, people are already starting to raise questions about this substance that we're using. And it made me concerned, because I believe that the community, my friends, myself, we weren't informed. We didn't know. We were just like using this as a sex toy. I think I think it was June of 1981, I read I heard a report, or I read a report about 5 gay guys who were young getting sick, and with this mysterious kinds of diseases, uncommon diseases, and it made me very concerned. So I went to the medical library that same day, and I wanted to find out about poppers, because I was concerned about, well, what are we doing that might be problematic? And poppers was at the top of my list in terms of stuff that differentiated us from fast lane straight guys.
And what kind of warnings did you see when you went through the medical literature at that point?
Well, people were raising concerns that it might be harmful, it could be carcinogenic. This was nitrite-based products. We were concerned about nitrite in meats. Nitrites could be carcinogenic, and they were controlling the amount of nitrites in bacon and different meat products. So here we're using a substance that's concentrated doses of nitrites, and that was troubling. Made me want to learn more and raise some questions. It was also troubling because I didn't know anything, and then all of a sudden I realized, gee, I've been doing, inhaling this stuff kind of mindlessly, and it's potentially harmful.
How often would people ingest poppers a night?
Well, that would be from a range. There would be a range of people that would use a small number of sniffs to people that would use dozens of sniffs. I had the experience of going through the first epidemiologic reports at UCSF. I called the researchers at San Francisco General, and I wanted to know, what did they find out about us? They were having large numbers of gay guys were telling about their sex lives, their drug lives, and we were trying to get clues. And so I called up, and I found out that they had not processed the questionnaires yet, because the grant, the government funding hadn't come through. They were waiting for the money. And I went out to I met the researcher, went out to his office, and I saw a pile of questionnaires that was about 1.5 feet high, sitting on his desk. And I said, well, what did you learn? And he told me, we haven't started yet. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, well, we've started falling, we're falling apart. Some people have already died. Other friends are getting sick, and we need clues. So I talked the researcher, Dr. Moss, Andrew Moss, into letting us go through the questionnaires and do data processing. So within 2 weeks, we rounded up dozens of data processors from the gay community. And at night, we put all the answers into the computer, and we could get some clues. While we were doing that, I sped read through a lot of those studies, and I could see, it was my first vision of the number of sex partners we had and how heavy our drug use was. So I got a preview of what would later surface in the reports.
And how did poppers play into that report?
A lot of people use poppers, and the range of use was variable, where some people they'd say, yes, I use them, but their quantity of use would be very small. And other people would say, yes, I use them, and it would go like off the scale, like dozens of sniffs and heavy use. And other people would say, yes, I use them, but then maybe 3 or 4 sniffs. So there was a range, a spectrum of use. In terms of dependency on poppers or people that might get addicted to them, I think that my boyfriend, who would always use poppers when he had sex, except for the times we fought about it, he would just use them. He would also use them when he jerked off, or if he masturbated, if he used them with porno. Even without a partner, he would use them. So we have people that use poppers with people. We also have people that use poppers because they like the effect.
Okay. Is it true that some people they use poppers as a sexual crutch? They became so dependent that it was almost impossible to have an orgasm without snorting?
Well, I would say that's probably true for some people. I mean, some people have stated that. They verbally stated that. I know my boyfriend could not do certain things sexually unless he used poppers. And I'm not talking about anal intercourse. I'm talking about oral sex. He was uptight, he was newly out, and he wasn't relaxed. But when he used poppers, you would think he was like a all-star long-time player.
Did he ever develop KS?
Yes, he did. And he continued to use poppers well into the point in time when he was getting sick. And I think that's because of his dependency. And sometimes we were in bed and he would get up, and I was thinking he was going to get some rubbers, and he'd come back with a bottle of poppers. And that was after I was already being a leader in the community, trying to alert people about poppers, and after he was already aware of the research. And that was really telling to me about how dependent he was on them. And we had some fights about that. About, not bad fights, not physical fights, but some discussions.
Was it a profitable industry?
Well, yeah, poppers are very, very profitable. They can make them for pennies. A bottle of poppers is very cheap to make, and you make big bucks on them because it's so cheap to make. So I think because of that, they're not going to disappear. They're going to always be around. Independent of whether they're legal or illegal, they're going to be around because they're profitable, if there's a demand.
Now, I read somewhere that poppers were a $50 million a year industry at some point.
Well, that was back in I think 78, they projected that, something like that. And if you figure that they were in every gay bathhouse, every bar, every porno bookstore across the nation, including the conservative areas, that's a lot of businesses. There's one ad that says that they had 40,000 outlets nationwide. And then there's another ad that was on the internet recently that said that they sold 25,000 bottles of Rush daily. Daily. I was shocked. I was shocked that they were so clueless that they would advertise that they were selling an illegal product and that they would quantify how much they were selling. That was pretty shocking to me.
Worldwide or in the U.S.?
I think that was worldwide.
That's still a lot.
That's still a lot. It's a lot of money.
Per day.
Yeah. If it's true. If it's half true, it's a lot. I think the Wall Street Journal did an article, and they projected there was a $50 million a year industry, and that was back in the late 70s. And after that assessment, the promotion proliferated even more, where we had multiple popper full-page ads in gay publications, gay newspapers had popper ads. Some of the porno magazines targeted at gay men had multiple full-page ads of poppers. And it was like a big campaign to get people to use them and buy their brand. I remember seeing the small ads in the publications, and then pretty soon it went from quarter-page ads to half-page ads to full-page ads, 1 or 2 ads to mini ads in a magazine, and that was in a short period of time from the late 70s through the early 80s.
And how come poppers became popular in the gay community? Like, how did that happen, and why only the gay community?
Well, I think that anal intercourse, anything that will relax the sphincter muscle can be helpful for gay guys who are having anal sex. And you have some guys that are bigger than other guys. So it's a matter of biology. If you're relaxing the sphincter muscle, that's a plus. Yeah.
Now, in 1981, you started the committee to monitor poppers. What motivated you for starting this committee?
Well, when I went to the library that first time and found out that there were already people, scientists that were cautioning what might be the problems with these drugs in terms of health effects, I thought it was important that we at least put a caution out to the community and flash a yellow warning light that, gee guys, we're using these drugs pretty heavily and we don't know much about them. And that potentially they were harmful. And potentially they were connected to the AIDS epidemic. Potentially they were either the cause of AIDS or a cofactor or a risk factor for AIDS. I think that I've always thought it was easy for people to understand that they were disinhibiting and that they would affect people's behavior. I think it was not as clear for people to understand that they might also affect the immune system and that they might be immunosuppressive and increase susceptibility to infection. I was concerned on all those factors right from the beginning, that they might be either a cause or a cofactor. And I think we talked about cofactors right from the beginning in terms of what we were doing. And I also figured by forming the group that if anybody else knew horror stories or bad information, that it would kind of like trickle, it would trickle into us. And we needed to be a repository of information about the things. I discovered early on that this was going to be an intense issue in the community, because when I raised the topic, I had a couple people yelling at me in gay bars. And all I was doing was raising the issue, and people had intense feelings about it. And I was never we never banned poppers in San Francisco. We went for a point of sale warning strategy, an education option. And people, I remember this one time I was in a bar drinking a beer, being social, cruising, and some guy comes up to me and starts yelling at me. And he was like thinking I was taking his poppers away. And all we did was pass a law that required a warning be posted at the point of sale. And he was like totally flipped out. And
what did the warning say?
The warning cautioned people that poppers were potentially immunosuppressive, and they might be harmful to health. Do you want to get one of the yellow? In 1982, we had a hearing at the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, and we were concerned about poppers. Poppers were in businesses all over the city, and we wanted to do an education strategy, and basically we wanted to caution people that these products may be harmful to health. So we passed a point of sale warning law so that if you sold poppers, you had to have a warning posted at the point of sale, okay? And what we did was that law went into effect in 1983, and we had the Rush Company was kind enough to print the warnings for the businesses, and then they provided the businesses the warnings that had to be posted. And Rush was clever enough to use their own colors. These are the Rush colors, and so the warnings were posted. Now, the warnings did not go up in San Francisco until 1984 and 85. I went around and did a survey of businesses and found out that the warning signs were not up. I made a list and sent it to the district attorney. The district attorney sent out investigators to corroborate what I was telling him, and issued warnings to those businesses and told them if they put the warnings up, there would be no prosecution. It was a $500 fine if you didn't have the warnings posted. Overnight, warnings went up all across the businesses selling the poppers. And use went way down. it was noticeable that use went down. The epidemiology reports reflected that. And that was still at a point where we were trying to figure out what caused AIDS, and I think it was still a big puzzle. It continues to be a puzzle all the way up till when I'm speaking, which is 2006. But some people, they don't think it's a puzzle anymore because they got stuck. And this is I think the history of poppers in the epidemic is a group of people getting stuck at different places despite the accumulating research, which continues to mount. We first had the caution was raised in 1981. Poppers were at the top of the list as possibly causing AIDS or being a cofactor. When AIDS was discovered in 1984 or 1983, when HIV was discovered, I think in 1983 or 1984, depending on who you believe discovered it, people crossed poppers off the list. Okay. When the first mice study, the big CDC mice study was done in 1983, we had gay people all over were looking at that mice study. And we had raised the caution. The caution light had been turned on. So people were looking at the mice study, and then all of a sudden, poppers were vindicated by the CDC mice study. The conclusion was that poppers were not immunosuppressive, and a whole group of people crossed poppers off the list. The popper industry did full-page ads in the gay press, and they said they were vindicated. So you had a whole group of people crossing poppers off the list. That was a big challenge.
What does the warning sign say?
Okay, the warning sign. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Whatever the most poignant or salient features are.
It says whether continued inhalation of alkyl nitrates may affect the immune system is not known, but several different studies have suggested that some impairment of the immune system is possible.
What year is that?
And that was this was 1983. The sign is 1984. The law was passed in 83. This was made in 1984. And you can see the Rush logo up here. The law did not require that the logo be on the sign. So we had that first mice study done at CDC, and it was very troubling because they didn't find immunosuppression, and then the popper companies. So here this is 1982. New York native, headline story, do poppers cause cancer? Cautioning the community. And then in 1983, we have the first report of the mice study, and they conclude that poppers were not immunosuppressive. So we have the popper industry running full-page ads in the Advocate, the mainstream national gay newspaper. It ran a series of ads called Blueprint for Health. References the CDC study, clearly claims that they're vindicated, does a series of 6 ads over 3 or 4 months, flashes a green light on using poppers, and that was a big setback because a lot of people weren't worried about poppers anymore. To this day, we have people that will reference that CDC mice study. I think that mice study was the most widely publicized mice study in the history of the epidemic. And subsequent mice studies, the problem is subsequent mice studies, all of which showed significant immunosuppression, were not publicized. And they were just published in medical journals, and some of them never were rippled to the gay community or to people in the community who were using poppers. One of the goals that we set out from the beginning was that if something was published about poppers, we wanted to ripple it to the community. And that would be the grassroots community, people who were using the products, potential users, and also people that were in the education prevention field, as well as doctors. So we set out as an education strategy to keep putting the published research out to the community. with the hope that people would respond to research. And I've got to tell you that they do. The Achilles heel of the poppers industry is research, and that's the big challenge now, is to ripple what we know back to the community, put it in a context where people can understand, and then they'll self-correct if they need to, and they'll be able to navigate through this part of the puzzle.
Okay.
Here's a Discaroma ad, full page ad called Discaroma because people use it on the dance floor. I thought that was interesting. And then the safe one. This is when I talk about the safe one, there's a thing called what I call the gourmet myth, and that is that amyl nitrite, which is pharmaceutical grade, is safe, and it's not contaminated by impure products or contaminants. So there's a whole group of people to this day that think that pharmaceutical grade amyl nitrite is safe, and that's not true. There have been studies that show that all the nitrite-based products are immunosuppressive. They all affect the immune system in some way. And I think that that's a big challenge we have right now in 2006. That mythology continues. That's unfortunate. The research, and now they have new products because they're trying to circumvent the ban. So we have new chemical formulations which have never been safety tested on anybody or mice, and we don't know what the effect is. I'm assuming and projecting that they're immunosuppressive because they're nitrite based, and I think that's the key part. The science is not there yet, but the people are the industry's being allowed to market the product as if it's safe. That's a big problem for our community.
Now, did any red flags go up in the late 70s concerning the potential dangers of poppers?
Yeah, in 1977, Dr. Hamilton in San Francisco, a gay doctor, and one of the first out gay doctors, did a survey of 500 gay guys and wanted to find out what their attitudes and experiences were using poppers. He was concerned that these products were potentially harmful, could be carcinogenic, or who knows what, but were potentially harmful. And so he did that study.
What was his findings?
Where's that? His findings were that I think 58% of the people in the study felt like they were harmful. Significant numbers of people found that they affected their breathing. They had a respiratory impact on their respiratory function. Others felt like they were I can't remember what the others felt. As prior to the AIDS epidemic surfacing in 1981, there were already people raising cautions about using poppers. They were few and they weren't widely publicized. And they were doing that in the context of a publication industry that was featuring full-page ads for poppers. It was making revenue from popper ads, and an industry that was promoting them as safe and pure and powerful, and kind of like exciting, a new sex toy. Although popper use in the late 80s in San Francisco, by the epidemiology, almost disappeared, which was real interesting. On a graph, it was just a steady decline. Of course, we in this city had a steady drumbeat of people educating people and having an increasing death rate, an increasing mortality rate at that point in time. So people were really frightened, and people were doing whatever they could to navigate through this epidemic. We had no treatments. So all we could do was modify our behavior and hang in there with hope.
Now, what happened when popper use declined? What happened? Did we see anything with KS at the same time?
Yeah, we saw KS decline. Interestingly, parallel to the decline in popper use, and KS declined. The cases of KS declined before the advent of protease inhibitors, which was a big breakthrough for HIV control in 1996. We started to see the prevalence of KS decrease in the early 90s.
Okay.
And
Now-
Haverkost has more information on that.
Okay.
The popper industry has named its products room odorizers or video head cleaner, leather cleaner, boot cleaner, aroma therapy to circumvent the safety laws to protect people. If you market your product as an inhalant or as a drug, you're required to do safety testing before you can market it. If you self-label your product as a room odorizer or liquid incense, then you're able to circumvent, in theory, some of the drug laws, the safety laws that are supposed to protect consumers. The FDA, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, have allowed this industry to circumvent the safety laws to protect consumers.
The type of advertising you see in the gay press, the FDA must have known what the intended use for the room odorizers was for.
Right.
Why do you think they turned a blind eye?
I think it's because I think the FDA has not chosen to prioritize the concerns and the health safety of gay men. I think it's homophobia. I think that if people were other categories of users, if other people were using poppers, and it wasn't overwhelmingly gay men, I think the people that are charged to protect the health of consumers would have a higher priority in enforcing the law. This law that was passed and went into effect in 1991 has seen one prosecution in over a decade. One prosecution. Despite the industry claims they're selling 25,000 bottles daily worldwide, despite the fact that they see multiple ads on the internet, despite that they've had multiple complaints about the marketing of these products. They're not prioritizing enforcement, and they're not even doing symbolic enforcement. I've requested that they do some symbolic enforcement so that anybody that's put on notice that sells these products knows that sometime in the future they might be held responsible.
Now, where were poppers advertised?
Poppers are advertised on the internet widely right now. Poppers are advertised in gay porno publications in the past, no longer. That's because they can be held responsible easier. It's harder to prosecute people that market stuff on the internet. The other element that's a given is that poppers will continue to be promoted and available to people because of the internet. If people are not allowed to market them in the United States, they'll go offshore, or they'll market them from outside the United States. So the challenge is we have to educate people. They are going to be available. The law enforcement strategy has not been effective. It hasn't been tried. It's just there's nothing's happening on that front.
Did they try to market poppers to heterosexuals back in the late?
Yeah, they had some initial back in the okay. Let's see, where's my Playgirls? Back in the late 70s, 1980, there was an attempt to market poppers to heterosexuals, and we had some full-page ads in Playgirl targeted to heterosexuals. And from what I can tell, those ads surfaced and then disappeared, and apparently the ads didn't generate a response. Or I would think if they had, they would have kept the ads going. This is a full-page ad in Playgirl, 1980. Rush creates the world's greatest lovers.
Interesting.
Doesn't say how long they'll live.
What was the message in A Better Life Through Chemistry?
That we've got a new product that is a great sex drug, and at the bottom it says, as with discos, Bette Midler, and designer jeans, aromas were first appreciated by gays. So like we're being pioneers with this new sex toy, and that it's safe, and like Vanguard.
Okay.
Part of the message of this better living through chemistry is to promote the gourmet myth that some products are more pure than others, that there's a safe kind of poppers, and that the ones that cost more are purer, like pharmaceutical grade amyl, and that they're not dangerous, that they're not hazardous.
What do you think about the title, Better Life Through Chemistry?
Better living through chemistry.
Or Better Living Through Chemistry?
I think that it's very clever. I think it's clearly promotional. I think it's deceptive. I think it says green light, use these products. I think that it reinforces that for some gay people that think that they're on the vanguard of cutting edge, whatever cutting edge is, that it reinforces that whole mentality that we're trying out things kind of like ahead of the culture, which sometimes we are. And it plays into that mentality. Yeah. This 1977 back cover anyway, of Drummer features a cartoon kind of thing and emphasizes purity, power, and potency. Again, reinforcing that kind of gourmet kind of myth thing. And they had a series of these, and I'll show you. This is another one, and they changed each issue, so they're kind of fun, and it's kind of cartoon style. But those preceded the homoerotic ones. This is the Rush, the early days when they were actually capsules. Let's see if we have any more of those. They're just a series of cartoons, changing each time.
What's the message?
The message is pure, that they're powerful, and that they're potent. And it just keeps reinforcing that thing. Purity, power, and potency. And it's that whole thing that some products are more pure than others. And in terms of companies, the Great Lakes Products has had that as a theme from the beginning of their marketing, was that theirs was the purest. And I think that these are all pre-AIDS, but certainly as the AIDS epidemic came on, that whole concept of purity played to gay men's concern about health. Well, I mean, we went from publications of having a half-page ad to in 1981, as AIDS surfaced the same year, we went from back cover, full-page ads, 2 full-page ads in the back, 2 full-page ads in the front, double ad in the middle, another ad here, another full-page ad, put more quality, more strength, more purity in the product, and to hell with the packaging, the good stuff in the plain brown bottle, and just reinforcing that this stuff is safe, that this stuff is pure, and playing to that concern about impurities and contaminants. This poppers were aggressively marketed to our community. People were starting to, in 1981, the gay community was starting to hear about this new mysterious epidemic, and people were starting to think about health. And they started to beat that drum of safety and purity and quality. And that would continue and continues to this day as a major part of their marketing ploy to our community. And it does. I think they did a good job.
Yeah.
In terms of marketing. we're at, it's pretty formidable. And then when you have the health forces, abdicating, it's been pretty tough. We had that 1983 mice study that the Centers of Disease Control did. And so we had the gay community as a community looking at the results of that study. And then when it exonerated poppers and when they concluded that poppers were not immunosuppressive, for people that didn't get that message through the full-page ads of the popper company, the Public Health Service put out a pamphlet stating nitrite inhalants or poppers used by some homosexuals to enhance sexual excitement were thought to affect the immune system. This theory has been ruled out. So they basically gave using poppers a green light and said they're not immunosuppressive.
And they are.
And they are. This was published in 1984, distributed to people nationwide by the Public Health Service. They never self-corrected themselves. They never issued an alert, a cautionary statement saying they made a mistake. They actually did the contrary of that. They boasted that one of their accomplishments, one of the early accomplishments of the Public Health Service was to conclude that poppers were not immunosuppressive. Big mistake, big impact on the gay community. Lasting effect to this day.
Okay. Does that look right?
I'm going to talk a little bit about a very old study, or relatively old, I guess. Started actually in November of 1981, about 6 months into the AIDS epidemic, when a group from CDC and a group from NIOSH got together in Cincinnati. And the CDC epi people informed us that early on, almost 100% of the AIDS patients admitted nitrite use, and this was the strongest association of any risk factor that they could identify. And asked NIOSH to do an inhalation toxicology study with an immunotox component to it. NIOSH is National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. We are attuned to occupational diseases, occupational lung diseases in particular. We talked at the beginning of this study about trying to model use as it would occur by users rather than the kind of study we did here. We knew how to do the 6 hour a day, 5 days a week kind of study. We knew how long it took to get the chambers equilibrated, how long the time it took to wash them out. We also had some evidence that nitrite exposure also occurs in the work site, particularly in munitions workers. And so, partly to justify to ourselves doing the study, we did it as a classic toxicology, inhalation toxicology, not really attempting to model drug users.
The study that they did was flawed. The dose they used was too low. They didn't model the dosage so that it would replicate how people who use poppers do it. They use much smaller doses. The subsequent mice studies adjusted the dose and found significant immunosuppression. The study they did, the dose was too low. Now there'll be people, and that was the flaw of the study. However, even in their flawed study, they thought they saw thymic atrophy at the highest doses that they used, which were still very low. That was a clue that there was a problem. You don't want the thymus to atrophy, to shrink. Older people are more susceptible to infections, seniors, because their thymus over time, as you get age, shrinks. They need to do the CDC mice study over again and do it with higher doses and see what happens to those mice, if they can get them to live. I mean, they did kill a lot of the mice, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they would turn yellow, so they had a hard time. They had a hard time upping the dosage because the mice kept dying. So they had to keep reducing the dosage. That was also a clue. The fact that the mice at higher doses died, dead, was a clue that these things are hazardous. Then they went to the dose where the mice didn't die, and then they found out it wasn't immunosuppressive. But that dose wasn't the right dose. It was too low. They have to do it again, but they should be doing human studies. In 1983, we were looking for the CDC mice study, and we kept wondering what happened. Where are the results? And so we found out that this was taking a really, really long time to do this mice study, right? And we, in the gay community, were all watching, like, what happened? And then we found out that they were having problems because the dose they were using with the mice kept dying. So they had to then do a new batch of mice, which was taking time, right? It was taking a long time. So they had to keep reducing the dose that they gave the mice because the mice kept dying. This all took a long time because they didn't know what they were doing, basically. And so they finally found a dose where the mice didn't die. And then that dose they said was not immunosuppressive because it was such a low dose. But that low dose still did show thymic atrophy. The thymus shrunk. The thymus is very, very important for the immune system. And that was the clue that they forgot about. Of course, back then it was still maybe the infancy days of immunology. And maybe if they do it again, they could learn a lot more and get more conclusions. They need to do it over. They also need to skip to humans. Do it on humans. What's the effect of popper use on HIV viral load? What's the effect of popper use on the immune system? How does it affect susceptibility? Does it affect it? I think we can figure that out very quickly if we do another human dose, a human study on poppers today. We're doing mice again. Come on.
In the past, the CDC, especially with the Legionnaire's disease, have been criticized for discounting or not really taking seriously bacterial or toxicology problems.
Right.
If it's not an infectious disease, they don't care because they're strictly infectious.
Right.
Do you think they really downplayed the CDC mice study?
Yeah, I think that the CDC has downplayed looking at poppers and giving poppers its proper attention because that first off they exonerated it in 1983. I think they're reticent to correct themselves, to admit that they made a mistake, and they also are very slow to deal with cofactors, if at all. They're very programmed to look at infections and not deal with the complexity of some things that there can be cofactors. I mean that's what Haverkos is an expert on that. Yeah, I mean they screwed it up. They screwed the study up, and then they screwed the mice study up, and then Duisberg surfaces. So we have like a multiple factor of why they don't want to deal with the topic. First, they exonerated poppers by screwing up the mice study, and then a few years later, here comes Duisberg, right? And now they don't want nothing to do with poppers because the guy that's beating the poppers drum the loudest is Duisberg. So it's natural that they're going to go, oh, you know, poppers, Duisberg, poppers, Duisberg. So they make sure they don't do with poppers at all because that gives Duisberg some credibility. And we don't want to give Duisberg any credibility, including me.
Okay. And what were your reactions when you read what everyone should know about AIDS when they addressed the nitrites or the poppers?
On this?
Yes.
I thought they were premature, that they were going to harm our community, that they're going to hurt gay people because this is a green light for popper use. That's horrible. And each subsequent mice study that surfaced, I realized how harmful this is. They never self-corrected. There's still people that remember reading this.
Okay.
To this day.
Okay.
That's
Now, simultaneously, as poppers were being cleared as a potential causative agent, the popper companies were rolling out new nitrate products. Is that right?
Yeah, poppers were banned in 1988. The popper companies changed the chemical formulation of the product slightly to circumvent the ban. And then in 1991, alkyl nitrites were banned. And that's a broad category of nitrite inhalants, poppers. And recently we've seen a new product surface which is a variation of poppers so that it's not in the category of alkyl nitrites, which was the banned category. It's a new category, but it's still nitrite-based formulations. So so they've circumvented the ban by making slight adjustments of the chemical formulation. And that was a predictable thing. They did it. So we have the history of poppers being at the top of the list in 1981, and then we crossed off poppers in 1983 because of the CDC flawed my study, and then we crossed poppers off the list in 1994 because there was a discovery of the KS virus. And so when the KS virus was discovered, anybody who still was concerned about these studies that kept showing that poppers use was a significant risk factor for KS, which several studies have shown, they crossed poppers off the list because now they had a virus that caused KS. But what we found is that even though we have the KS virus, just to have the virus is not sufficient by itself to develop KS. We have many people that have the KS virus that don't have any KS. What we're finding is, and we have recent studies that show that using poppers is still somehow, and I don't think we understand all of it, significantly related to the development of KS or the KS seroconverting for the KS virus. See, if KS virus is in saliva, which is what they think it is, everybody who kisses doesn't get KS or isn't seroconvert for the KS virus. But there's been several studies that show that popper use is an independent risk factor for being positive for the KS virus. I think it's something that is fascinating because all these people that keep thinking that poppers they can put poppers to bed, like the debate about poppers, the poppers puzzle is over. They keep saying that, right? They think each time they cross it off the list, it's not gone away. The research accumulates, and the puzzle's still there.
Do you think poppers was a primary cause of KS?
Yes, in gay men, without question.
What if
I think KS in gay men is related to popper use, and that is not. We don't understand how it's related completely. It might be because it's immunosuppressive. It might be because it's stimulating the replication of the KS virus. I mean, there's different ways that poppers might affect KS and KS replication or the immune system. So it's a complex thing, and we're still trying to figure that out. I don't claim that we know that yet, but I think clearly, if we know that people that have operations that get immunosuppressive drugs develop KS, when they stop giving them the immunosuppressive drugs so they won't reject the new organ, the KS goes away. Stop the immunosuppression and the KS lesions go away. We had a study back in 1984 that I became aware of. A doctor gave me a study that a researcher gave him, and he couldn't get clearance to get the study published because James Curran at Center for Disease Control wouldn't sign off on it. So I called that researcher up. I read the stuff. I thought it was real important. It showed that KS, a risk factor for KS was popper use. Knowing the heavy use of poppers in our community, that would be important for the gay community to find out, to at least have that to reflect upon. So called the researcher, got his permission to publish the study in a gay newspaper. That researcher, Harry Haverkos, he was very frustrated because he couldn't publish his research. And here we're in the middle, in 1984, thousands of people are infected, thousands of people are getting sick, people are already dying, and here we're sitting on research. That's unethical. So he said, go ahead and publish it. And we got it published in the front page of Bay Area Reporter, a gay men's newspaper, a gay paper, 1 year before it was in a medical journal. And if it hadn't been published in that gay newspaper, would it ever have gotten permission to publish it? I think once it got published, it put pressure, in my opinion, put pressure on the, quote, officials to sign off and let it be published.
And what was the gist of the paper?
The gist of the paper was that popper use was an independent risk factor for development of KS. And that's still an important publication. I feel blessed that I found out that they had that study existed, because we were able to then, because we had a community vehicle, we could put it in the press, and it was on the front page a year before it hit a medical journal.
What medical journal did it hit?
Journal of Journal of American Medicine, something like that.
JAMA?
No, not JAMA, but the other one. There's another one.
Okay.
Anyway, it's
too many.
Yeah, but it did get published,
Okay.
and it's an insight though into the politics of research and stuff like that. You know, seeing that stack of articles was an insight for me on the research establishment. Waiting to look for the clues till the money came. Do you know what I mean? That was a little shocking. Luckily, they let us look at it, and that spurred my work on. I had another experience where I went to the International AIDS Conference in Geneva, and I saw a poster presentation, and I got a copy of it because they had a few copies, so I got a copy of it. It was done by one of our researchers here in San Francisco. It didn't see publication till 2005. It was on a poster in 1998. I went to the community advisory board of that researcher, seeking why it hadn't been published and trying to pressure them. They threatened to call the police on me. And all I wanted to know was, if you're going to study gay guys in this city, you're going to ripple back the information to us. You're not going to have it surface in Geneva on some conference for researchers and have it stop there. She finally published it. Really made me angry. But if I hadn't been in Geneva, I don't know to this day if it would have ever seen the light of day. I mean, I would have been raising hell about it until it got into a journal. But imagine having it be 8 years later.
Yeah.
And we're dying. And that's a lesson for the future, for people to not assume that people will do the right thing. Make sure they do the right thing. Make no assumptions. One of the lessons I've learned in the epidemic from the beginning is to assume nothing. Do not assume that experts know everything. One time I was working with Lee Soderberg, who did a lot of the NIDA research on immunology and the immunosuppression, tumor growth. He showed that exposure to poppers increased tumor growth in mice. He was up for his grant to get renewed by NIDA, and they turned him down, right? I called him up. I said, Lee, what's your next publication? He was all upset. I got him on the right day. He just found out. He said, oh, I'm really depressed. They're not going to renew my grant. I said, why not? And he said, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, can you appeal it? And he said, yes. I said, well, I'll send you everything I know that I've collected, and let's appeal it and see what happens. I sent him this packet of published stuff, right, that I've collected, because I try to find out everything. He calls me back and he says, thanks a lot. Half of the things you sent me I didn't even know about. and he's the expert, right? But because I have the time to do all the digging through the research library and everything, I came up with a bunch of stuff he didn't even know about. And then he got his grant renewed when he resubmitted it with the. But that was the inside of that is that he didn't know half the stuff that was out there. That's that I was shocked at that.
Wow, that's interesting.
But that's a lesson for people in the future, to take management of your own illness. Don't rely on just the experts. I mean, that's been the lesson of AIDS activism from Marty, ACT UP, is to sit at the table with, quote, the experts. And then pretty soon you demystifies.
What was the first drug you took?
I took AZT back in 1988, and I did it at the dose of 1,200 milligrams, which was a toxic dose. I only did it for 30 days, and I rebelled, and I cut the dose in half on my own, and then did 600 milligrams a day. I still had a toxic reaction at 600 milligrams, meaning I felt horrible. I was getting anemic. My muscles, I could tell my muscles were being destroyed. I swim every day. I have never felt so bad when I swim as when I was on AZT. And then I went down to 1 pill a day, 100 milligrams a day. So I still felt horrible on 100 milligrams a day. And then I just stopped it. And I was like what you call a refusenik. And I felt like it wasn't the solution, that it was doing more harm than good. I think that I'm alive today because I stopped, and I feel like that was a lucky gamble. And it was a gamble at the time because we didn't know what to do. But I felt it was very toxic, and it is toxic. then started trying those other medications.
What was the next drug you tried?
I did D4T, DDC, DDI, 3TC. I did all of them. I was the first person in the country that got to do Zygen, which is also a nucleoside analog. And I was in a study for that at San Francisco General. It was a dementia study. And within 3 days of doing the drug, I could feel my old self. I mean, I was having, when I was getting sick in 96 and 97, I was plummeting when I had the 26 T cells. And I was having capacity problems in terms of mental capacity stuff. I had stopped D4T because of peripheral neuropathy. That's why I wear sandals today. I have permanent damage in my legs and my feet. I should have listened to my body, but I thought I would be macho and tough it out. That you'll get used to it, and then you'll be able to endure it. I didn't realize it was destroying the nerves.
What side effects have you experienced with the drugs?
I've had nausea where I've had to where I've thrown up. I've had a hernia where I've had to have a hernia operation. I don't think that's a formal side effect that is listed by the FDA, but I know that in communication over the internet with other people that are people with AIDS, hernia surfaced multiple times in our conversations, and I thought that was fascinating. And I'm sure that it's a side effect of one of the drugs. Which one, I don't know. I've had fever, I've had tingling, I've had headaches, I've had nausea where I thought I was going to throw up and I wish I would. What else? Stiffness. I still have stiffness right now. Now, is that because I'm getting older? Or is it from the medications? I go off the drugs sometimes, still, even though my T cells plummet. I play around with treatment interruption because I think the drugs are toxic. And I think that for a long-term strategy, like to live to be 100, and my philosophy is I have an active sex life, I want to live to be 100. Because of Viagra, I think that I want to live a long time. I enjoy it, you know. So I'm trying to do something that will give me a chance to live for a long time, knowing that if I do these drugs continually, that I'll be unlucky. No, if I do the drugs continuously without interruption, I think that they'll have a cumulative damage.
So do you think you can keep patients? As someone who's HIV positive, is it smart to keep someone on drugs for the rest of their life? I
think that we're all individuals. I think that all the different combinations have different side effects. I think that the complexity and the thing that's hard in the community is that one of us will do well on one drug and our roommate for the same drug will have a bad side effect. That is a mind fucker, because it's like, is it because I'm not tough? Is it genetics? What is it? We don't understand that. But I know people that are like horses, have no impact with some drugs, no side effects, and somebody else falls apart. So it's all individualized. That makes it really like we have to really kind of figure it out ourselves, and that's a challenge. For myself, I don't advocate treatment interruptions for anybody, but I do them, and I still haven't figured out how to do them completely, but I do them enough so that I feel confident that I'm not being exposed to drugs all the time.
What's the worst side effect you've had?
Well, the one where I felt like I would have a wave of nausea come on me predictably after X amount of time after taking the medication, where I just have to like lay down and endure it until it would go away. I mean, I was totally non-functional, and I can't remember exactly which drug it was. I think it was one of the protease inhibitors, and that's a horrible side effect. The other part is where one, you have to eat. One, you can't take. You have to take it so many hours before you eat, and you have to take it so many hours after you eat. And there was a small range of time in the middle where you could eat, and then I felt bloated. And so you felt bloated because the side effect was also, I felt like bloated. But you had to eat even though you didn't feel hungry.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do that drug very long.
So how many drugs have you taken yourself off of?
I think I've taken myself off of 9 of them. I've been lucky because I haven't developed resistance to any of them yet. So even though the ones have caused me side effects, I could try them in the future. And I would be willing to if it meant, if I had to do it
Okay.
to survive. For a little bit, then I would go off of them again. I mean, some of them are just outrageous. When I hear that they're using some obsolete drugs in some of the poor countries that cause horrific side effects, I think that's a real moral and ethical question. Just a few weeks ago, we had reports that I think in South Africa, D4T is being used, and they're starting to have people develop peripheral neuropathy. That's not. They should know that's going to happen. It's a predictable. I mean, to me, it's a predictable consequence of using those drugs is peripheral neuropathy with some of them.
Do we use that drug here?
They're still using it with some people, but at a much lower dose. I hope they're using the right dose in South Africa. I don't know if they are. I'll find that out in Toronto when I talk to people.
Are we exporting drugs that we would no longer take in single doses in the United States to Africa and giving them in single doses?
See, I'm not sure. I got to find that out. I'm worried that that might be the case.
Okay.
I don't know. I hope it's not.
Can you recall what thoughts and emotions came over you when the doctor said you had AIDS?
Well, no. I think when I saw the lesion, I knew it was KS because I was familiar with people that had KS. But I also figured I would want to fight, and I'm an activist, and I want to be part of the resistance. I mean, I look at it like in metaphors of World War II, the Nazis and the Holocaust, and I figure like I want to go out fighting, and I want to go out well informed. I like to be my own second opinion. I go to the medical library at least once or twice a month. I love Project Inform. I want to double check everything. I go to these AIDS conferences because I want to see what the experts are seeing.
Okay.
I want to hear what they're hearing. I have respect for expertise, but my experience during this epidemic has demystified expertise.
Okay. Can you tell me, how were you diagnosed with AIDS since you didn't have the benefit of an HIV test at the time?
Well, in 1987, I had a lesion on my arm, a little spot that was raised in color, and they biopsied it, they cut it out, did a lab analysis of it, and it was KS, Kaposi sarcoma.
And so the doctor told you you had AIDS?
Yeah. Every year I go to the Castro Street Fair and the Folsom Street Fair, and each of those street fairs has one of them has a couple 100,000 people, and the other one has 100,000 people. And I'm motivated every year because I see clusters of people standing around looking at this. And what it's told me is that people want to navigate through this epidemic. They want information, and when they get information, they'll use it. And so our challenge is just, we've got the research out there, we just got to get it to our community. I trust my community will self-correct when given the right information or given information. I also know that the Achilles heel of the poppers industry is research. And the one thing that they don't want people to know is what's already been accumulated. This top study, it says increased tumor growth in mice exposed to inhaled isobutyl nitrite. It's a real important study. They had 2 groups of mice, and the mice that got exposed to poppers had 4 times as many tumors, and the tumors grew, I think, 5 times faster. That's a real important study. And what I found with most people is, as soon as they read the title, they told me, I don't need to read the rest.
Is this the actual title of the paper?
This is the title of the paper that's in a medical journal, yes. And most people are shocked that this is in publication because they didn't know about it and no one's told them about it. And then the second one, amyl nitrite alters human in vitro immune function. It's a human study where we wanted to know what was the effect on the human immune system. So we had gay guy volunteers inhale poppers, and we wanted to see what was the effect on the immune system. When I say we, I didn't do the research, but I consulted with the folks, and they had people take 3 sniffs. We thought we would try to get them to let them take more, but the safety committee wouldn't let people take more because they were nervous that people might hurt themselves. We told people that people take a lot more sniffs than that in real life, but we found that natural killer cell function was immediately suppressed. And natural killer cell function is a real important part of the human immune response to any infection. And that's the thing you don't want to suppress, because it increases susceptibility to any kind of infection. And if you've been exposed to HIV, it would increase your susceptibility to HIV. So that's a human study. It was mandated, a little bit of background, it was mandated by Congress that NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, do a human study to find out what the effect was on the immune system and report back to Congress within 6 months. That was mandated back in 1986, and it was because the gay constituents of the chair of the health committee in Congress were pressuring for this kind of research. Unfortunately, today, 20 years later, we're back to mice studies. So during the course of the research effort, we've only had 1 human study, and all the rest are mice. I think it's time for another human study, and I think that the community will respond. This is part of my message to people. This is part of my message to people that are skeptical about whether HIV is harmful. And one of my messages is continue to be a skeptic, continue to not trust profiteering pharmaceutical companies, continue to ask questions, assume nothing. I have common ground with a lot of people who are skeptical about HIV. We know the pharmaceutical companies are profiteering. We know that they don't have ethics, but we also know that today, 25 years later, we have some weapons against HIV infection or against infection of opportunistic infections that we didn't used to have. We started out at the beginning of this epidemic and we didn't have anything. Today we have a whole shelf full of different weapons and we can use them. And be aware of those. These folks, the profiteering pharmaceutical companies, they're not going away. They're going to be here. So keep asking questions, stay skeptical, and if you need to use those weapons, use them.